Magic trick in space. Instead of making something levitate, you make it fall. 2008, October 14th through October 24th, give or take. Richard Allen Garriott de Cayeux paid $30 million to be on the ISS, the International Space Station. In a radio show interview at one point or another later on, he said, "Oh, how did I do this trick?" This is the trick. He is in zero gravity. Normally, magicians try to make things disappear and hover and do all sorts of weird things. The trick here was to fake gravity. Now, gravity accelerates at so many feet per second. Something else that'll emulate that kind of convincingly is something moving under a continuous force that keeps adding to it, so it does accelerate. It has to have a starting point and it has to accelerate. And it's a subtle difference if you don't get it matched up correctly. He attached a playing card, held it up with one hand, and he held up literally a hammer with a piece of thread on it, which kind of looks suspicious to me. He made it hover, because you can kind of do that, and then he let go of the playing card and it fell in a manner that looked more like it was falling in gravity. I'm sure he played around with it, maybe even did some measurements or had somebody do the calculations for him, because he's not a scientist. He had no business being aboard that thing. But he used something that's commonly called invisible or magic elastic thread, or magic thread, or card pulling thread. You set up a set of cards, and you can shovel them if you're careful, and then inside of, not on the surface of it, inside of the card, you push into the card with a very fine needle and glue in this really hair-thin piece of thread. Now, some of the varieties of this thread, you hold onto the card, let go of it, it'll pull it right into your shirt sleeve. You have to have loose shirt sleeves. You can also make a piece of equipment that does this to where there's two threads, and it'll drag it right into your palm, or into the sleeve. It doesn't normally eject, but you can use this to power an ejection unit, so it can throw a card. Also, I should point out that card sharks at one time used really complicated mechanisms to do a similar thing. The other one is you could make it to where you had a card in one hand and you'd carefully kick a foot or just twist your foot to the left or the right, and it would pull on a static string. That had to be high tensile strength, not stretchy. This is the opposite. It's an elastic thread strand. Now, where I got them from when I was trying to do magic tricks a long time ago is I would get them from elastic bands from Fruit of the Loom underwear. Not kidding. There is a particular variety of thread size in a particular variety that came out at one point that had these really fine threads. And they weren't elastic necessarily. They were made out of some other thing besides, rubber. And that was for the elastic band. Look up how an elastic band is made. I'm sure there's some stupid YouTube video showing you how. I don't want to go look it up. But anyway, the point is we would take the threads out and use them to make it to where it would pull on things. You could make them to make toy cars move. You'd put a whole bunch of them in, and you could turn it, and you can make your own toy car where you push it backwards and then hold onto the rear wheels and drop it and have races. But the reason you use the thin stuff is you can make it almost a sheet of very thin elastic band material, and it would work. Anyway, the thing I noticed about the stuff when you get it is it has a tendency of accelerating an object simply because it's really pulled really thin. And the note I saw said that it would pull 7 or 3 times its normal length and before breaking, and it would come to a halt at that point, and it would be a static thread, and then it would pull on it. So he held up the things and let go of them both, and the thread pulled. It just would have to be, this is the thing I do know about it, because you don't want it to accelerate fast, you want it to accelerate relatively slow, you make it a long strand tied way down below you, below you on the camera, like let's say 3 or 4 screens worth, let's say 3-4 feet, and you pull it up just enough to get the card so it just pulls it out of frame. That's all you need. And the thing is, you can do the same thing with it going up against gravity so it flies out of your hand, so you can make flying card trick. And you kind of have to get away with holding the cards and making it look natural when it totally doesn't. Watch Penn and Teller's BS and their magic tricks, and they'll talk about how you're trying to distract people from the stuff that doesn't look real or natural. In this case, you're in an unnatural situation trying to make a natural looking thing, and people tend towards, this is important, they tend towards assuming that things are normal. For all you know, I could be hanging upside down like a bat right now. Unless something is dangling here, it won't do it. And you can do the same trick if you want to with almost the same thing. You can make a slowly floating away card trick by using a full-sized a helium balloon, and you have to get it the weight right to where it'll make it drift away. And you want to make sure there's a wind source pushing it, a fan, a light, low-intensity, quiet fan. You can look up all sorts of card tricks with this sort of thing. But anyway, this was the Pocket o' Gravity card trick, where he said, oh, you can have pockets of gravity aboard the space station. Now, I want to point out two things here. No, this isn't NASA. This is some rich-ass person who's on there. By the way, apparently he has a YouTube channel. Links below in the description. And it's called User Garriott, R.A. Garriott, Richard Allen Garriott. And that may actually be his YouTube channel. He hasn't responded to it for a long time. And it's just some rich guy who wanted to go up in space. And I kind of I have a problem with this. It annoys me. But the money he put in, $30 million, paid for meals for a while. I mean, you know? I mean, how much money is actually spent on keeping the ISS up? How much money does it cost? Think about it. This is a continuing project. It's been up there for a while. It's not like a rocket shot to put something in orbit and it has a beginning, middle, and end. This is continuous. Chronic. So anyway, but the Pocket of Gravity trick was an elastic band thing. You can also do the same thing, this is how I would do it, with a static string. He might have actually used that instead, and use a really thin thread. It's harder to see on camera if you use the static material rather than the elastic stuff. But I'm going to point to a video below that shows you, I think it ends in 44PK, where the guy's showing you on video the thread and demonstrating it. And you can't see it. And he's got the camera pretty close to his hands. It's really hard to see this stuff. But anyway, you can do the thread trick with ultrafine. That's the name of the brand that I used. There's a version of that that's, there's also wire that's called ultrafine. These are extremely fine gauge, special purpose materials for making things. The fine gauge wire is used for wiring up microcircuits and repairing circuit boards. Another microfine for thread that's a static lead material is used for tensioners for all sorts of technical stuff, like making toy planes all the way to making really delicate instruments. I got it from Edmund Scientific. That's literally the company I got it from. And that static material I used within it's called a straw spring trick. You literally put an elastic band or a straw inside of a straw, or a spring. You get the spring from a big pen. And it lets you have a static pull level on it. And you thread it through, pun intended, a piece of flexible tubing. So it acts like a bicycle cable with a casing around it. So you can move it anywhere you want to. I use that to make robotic hands for a little toy I made. Actually, for somebody to do a stop motion task for making a movie. We put all the cables in so they could control the fingers without having to physically touch them. So they could use really soft clay to make really realistic fingers, but not have to manipulate them. It's really hard to make a human hand, especially an artificial one. I made one. I think it ended up being used by Will Vinton Studios or something. It was one of hundreds of them. I'm sure I'm not the only one who was a model maker. I don't even think I could put that on my resume anymore because I can't prove I did it. But I built a bunch of the arms, but that's how I did it. And again, Edmund Scientific, and I think I got flex tubing from someplace too. The point is, you can look up how to do these magic tricks before you do this. I happen to have done this at one time, just when I was a kid. And at that time, it was $3 and a coupon, and you had to send it in from the comic book magazine, and you know, wow your friends with literally one trick. It was more fun putting it on the toy car. Honestly, it really was. I got 5 feet of the stuff, so that was really good for, you know. I'm ashamed. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.